I moved into that house in late October, right before the cold started to settle into the small town of Winthrop, Maine. It wasn't much, a creaky two-story house on the corner of a quiet street, but it felt like a fresh start. I'd been through a bad year, a breakup, the loss of my job, and that quiet ache that comes when you start realizing how little the world notices you. The house was old, the kind that smelled faintly of damp wood and forgotten dust, but rent was cheap and the landlord seemed eager to have someone move in. He said it had been vacant for a while. When I asked how long, he hesitated, then muttered something about a year or two. I didn't think much of it at the time, the first few days were fine. The place needed work, but it had charm in a strange, lonely way. There was a narrow staircase that groaned when I walked on it, wallpaper that peeled at the edges, and a basement that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But it was quiet. Peaceful, even. Until the third night. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not to a noise exactly, but to an absence of sound, as if the world outside had stopped breathing. Then, faintly, from the wall beside my bed, I heard it. A slow, dragging sound. Like fingertips scraping along plaster. I held my breath, listening. The noise stopped. I laughed quietly to myself, probably mice, or the house settling. I tried to sleep again. But a few minutes later, there it was. Soft at first, then clearer. A whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely a woman's voice. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the wall. The sound faded, and after a few seconds, everything was silent again. In the morning, I told myself it had been a dream. I went to work, came home, and forgot about it. But that night, when I turned off the light, I noticed something new, thin, straight scratches on the paint near where my bed touched the wall. Fresh. Small, but real. I touched them, and a tiny flake of plaster broke off under my finger. I stood there for a long time, my chest tight. Maybe I'd done it somehow. Maybe it was already there, and I just hadn't noticed. Still, I moved the bed a few inches away from the wall. Just in case. 2 nights later, the whisper came back. It was louder this time, more deliberate. Not the random hum of the house, no, this was different. It started with a long, slow breath, followed by what sounded like a name. My name. Ellen. The voice was hoarse, almost desperate, as though whoever it belonged to had been speaking through dust for years. I sat up so fast my head spun. The whisper stopped. My eyes scanned the room, but there was nothing, no movement, no draft, just that thick, pressing silence. I kept my lamp on until dawn. The next morning, I went straight to the landlord. He lived 2 streets away, in a small brick house that looked like it had been standing since the 50s. When he opened the door, he looked tired, eyes heavy, lips dry. I told him about the noises, the voice, the scratches. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he sighed, rubbing his temple. That house, he said slowly, has a bit of a history. You're not the first to mention strange things. He glanced around, as if making sure no one else was listening. There used to be a woman who lived there. Maria. She was quiet, kept to herself. About 2 years ago, she just disappeared. No signs of a struggle. Her car was still in the garage. Dishes on the counter. Police came, looked around, found nothing. Just a missing person file that went cold. His voice dropped. Some say she never left. I asked him what that meant. He shook his head. Forget it. Don't start listening for things. If you hear something again, ignore it. Whatever it is, it wants attention. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. It wants attention. The phrase looped in my mind like a curse. I tried to drown it out with music, podcasts, anything that filled the silence. But around 2 a.m., when everything was quiet again, I heard her. Not whispering this time. Humming. A slow, sad tune, like a lullaby sung from another room. My skin prickled. I followed the sound across the floor until I stood before the wall again. I placed my ear against the cold plaster, and froze. I could hear breathing. Soft, steady, human. I pulled back, heart hammering, and whispered, "Who's there?" The sound stopped instantly. Then, faintly, from the other side of the wall, "You can hear me." The next morning, I found something strange on the wall. A small circle had been drawn in what looked like chalk, right where I'd pressed my ear. I wiped it off, but that evening, it reappeared, bigger, darker. This time, a faint handprint beside it. That's when I started recording. Every night, I left my phone on the nightstand, voice memo running. The first 2 nights, nothing. But on the third, around 2:13 a.m., the recorder picked up something. A woman's whisper. "Let me out." I didn't sleep that night, the following week blurred together. I was exhausted, paranoid, jumping at every creak. But what scared me most wasn't the noises, it was the pattern. The voice always came between 2:10 and 2:20 a.m., always near the same wall, always whispering fragments of words I couldn't fully catch. Sometimes I thought she was crying. Sometimes laughing. Once, I swear I heard knocking, 3 slow, hollow taps from inside the wall. I thought about breaking it open, but something in me hesitated. What if I found nothing? Or worse, what if I did? By the end of the month, I couldn't take it anymore. I called the sheriff's department, told them about the missing woman, the sounds, the recordings. They sent a deputy, a young guy named Morris, who looked like he didn't want to be there. He listened politely, inspected the wall, even played the recordings. His face didn't change. "Old houses make noise," he said finally. "Wind through the vents, animals in the insulation. Happens all the time." I told him about Maria. He shrugged. File still open, but after 2 years, he didn't finish the sentence. That night, I recorded again. Around 2:14, there was a new sound, metal scraping. Like nails on wire. Then, faintly, a whisper, behind the wall. The words were clear this time. Too clear. My throat tightened. I turned on every light, grabbed a hammer from the kitchen drawer, and stood staring at the wall for what felt like hours. Finally, I pressed my palm against it. The plaster felt cold. Too cold. Almost wet. I pulled my hand back, and in the faint light, I saw something dark on my fingertips. I brought it closer. It wasn't dirt. It was red, thick, dark, and faintly sticky between my fingers. I stared at it under the weak lamplight, trying to convince myself it was rust, or paint, or something that could be explained by logic. But deep down, I knew better. The smell told me everything. It was faint, but unmistakable, the sharp, metallic scent of old blood. My pulse quickened. I stumbled back from the wall, wiping my hand against my jeans, leaving faint crimson streaks. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the wind brushing against the windows, felt amplified, like the house itself was watching me breathe. By dawn, I'd convinced myself to leave. I packed a suitcase, grabbed my phone, and called my landlord. No answer. I called again, and again, until his voicemail filled with my panicked voice. But just as I was stepping out the door, I heard it again, a single word. Faint and desperate, from deep within the wall. "Please." I froze. The voice wasn't angry or ghostly. It was broken, pleading. I turned, trembling, staring at the wall that now seemed to pulse faintly in the morning light. Something in me couldn't walk away. I wish I had that. I spent that morning searching for anything about Maria, the woman who disappeared. Old news articles, archived police notes, anything. There wasn't much. A single local story from 2023, missing woman, no leads. Her picture was there. Dark hair. Brown eyes. A faint smile that somehow looked forced. The article said she'd been a schoolteacher, lived alone, no family nearby. The police found her phone, her wallet, her car, all still in the driveway. But no Maria. I closed my laptop and stared at the wall again. That same section near the bed. The one that whispered. My heart thudded as I walked closer. The air felt different there, colder, heavier, almost damp. I pressed my ear against the plaster. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound that didn't belong in any house. Breathing. Slow, labored, too real to be a memory. I whispered, Maria. And the answer came instantly, like she had been waiting all along. I'm still here. I stumbled back, heart hammering, my mind spinning between terror and disbelief. The voice sounded clearer now, closer, like the barrier between us had thinned. What do you want? I whispered. To be found. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I drank, paced, argued with myself in the mirror. Logic screamed at me to leave, but curiosity is its own kind of curse. Around 1:45 a.m., I grabbed a flashlight, the hammer from the kitchen drawer, and went upstairs. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock downstairs. I stood before the wall, flashlight trembling in my hand. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I didn't know who I was apologizing to. Then I raised the hammer and hit the wall. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Plaster cracked. Dust filled the air, and I coughed, swinging again. Another hit, and another, until a small hole formed. I shone the light inside. Nothing. Just darkness. But the smell that drifted out, it wasn't just rot. It was something worse. Dampness mixed with decay. I swung again, widening the hole until I could fit my hand through. My fingers brushed something soft. Fabric. I froze. Slowly, I pulled it out. It was a piece of faded blue cloth, like from a nightgown. Torn. Stained. My heart dropped. I stumbled back, breathing hard, eyes fixed on that black hole in the wall. From inside, faintly, something moved. The sound of fingernails scraping wood. I dropped the hammer that I called the police again. They sent 2 officers who arrived around 3 a.m., both half asleep and visibly annoyed. They inspected the hole, flashed their lights inside, then looked at me like I was crazy. There's nothing there, one said flatly. I insisted. I showed them the cloth, the recordings, the red marks. They exchanged a glance. One of them, Officer Riley, sighed and said he'd file a note for further inspection. They left soon after. I sat on the floor, alone again, staring at the hole they'd called empty. But I knew what I'd felt. And at 3:22 a.m., my phone, still recording on the nightstand, caught it, the sound of a woman laughing softly from inside the wall. When I played it back, the laughter wasn't faint anymore. It was right next to the microphone. The following days blurred together. I barely ate. Barely slept. Every time I walked by that wall, I could feel her. Sometimes whispering. Sometimes crying. Sometimes humming that same lullaby. Once, I heard the sound of footsteps inside the wall, slow, deliberate, moving upward toward the ceiling. I ran outside in the freezing air, staring up at the dark windows of my own house. For a split second, I saw movement. A shadow in the upstairs window, facing out. I wasn't upstairs. No one was. I started staying at a motel across town, but even there, sleep refused to come. The walls there were thinner, but sometimes at night, when it was quiet enough, I swore I could hear her faintly. Like she had followed me. Ellen, she'd whisper. You found me. Eventually, I went back. I told myself it was to grab my things, to move out for good. But I think part of me knew I'd never really left that house. When I opened the door, it smelled worse than before, mold, dust, and something older, like the scent of things buried too long. The hole in the wall was wider. I hadn't touched it. Around the edges, the plaster had cracked further, as though something inside had been pushing out. My flashlight flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw fingers reaching through the gap. But when the light steadied, there was nothing. Just the same dark hole, breathing cold air. I whispered, "Maria," and the reply came instantly. "Not Maria." My stomach dropped. The voice was lower this time, distorted, layered, like more than one person speaking at once. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the bed. The whisper came again, closer now. "You opened it." I ran. Out of the house, into the street, bare feet slapping against the pavement. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, chest burning, tears freezing on my face. I called the landlord again. This time, he answered. I shouted into the phone, told him what I'd found, what I'd heard. He was silent for a long moment before saying quietly, "You shouldn't have touched that wall." I demanded to know why. His voice trembled. "We sealed it years ago. When they found the first body." My heart stopped. "First?" I asked. "You said Maria disappeared," he cut me off. "She wasn't the first. That house used to be a boarding home in the 1950s. They found 3 people bricked into the walls. But we thought it was over. Until her." His voice broke. "Until now. I didn't go back. I couldn't." The police came a week later after a noise complaint from neighbors. They broke through the wall completely. What they found was never made public, but rumors spread, dark stains on the wooden beams, scraps of clothing, something resembling a human jaw. The landlord left town. The house was condemned. They say no one's been inside since. But 2 months later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small piece of plaster, cracked and white, with faint writing scrawled across it in red. Just 2 words, "Thank you." For weeks after the police sealed off the house, I tried to forget. I told myself it was over, that whatever had been in that wall was gone, buried, locked away behind tape and boards and official silence. I moved to another town, another life. I found a small apartment overlooking a busy street in Bangor, a place that never slept, where noise drowned everything else. For a while, I almost believed it had worked. I went back to work, started seeing people again, even laughed sometimes. But some nights, when the city quieted just enough, the past found me. It started with the dreams. Always the same, I was standing in front of the wall again, the plaster cracked open like a wound, the darkness behind it breathing softly. A voice would whisper my name, and I would wake with my chest tight, my sheets damp with sweat. I'd sit in the dark for hours after, staring at the walls of my new apartment, waiting for something I didn't want to hear. Then, one night in late December, I heard it, not in a dream this time, but clear, real, and impossibly close. A whisper, faint but familiar, brushing the air beside my ear. "Ellen," I froze, my entire body locking up, eyes fixed on the wall beside my bed. For a long time, nothing else happened. Then, just as I started to convince myself it had been in my head, I heard it again. 3 soft knocks. From inside. The next morning, I went to the police. I asked for the file on case number 52, the one from Winthrop. The officer at the desk looked at me strangely. "That file's restricted," he said. "You'd have to speak to the sheriff." I drove there the same day. The sheriff was older, a man who'd clearly seen too many things he wished he hadn't. When I told him my name, his expression changed. "You're the tenant," he said quietly. "The one from the McAllister property." I nodded. "I need to know what you found." He leaned back in his chair, his face tightening. "You don't," he said simply. But I didn't move. Finally, he sighed and opened a drawer. He slid a thin folder across the desk. It's all that's left. We closed the investigation 2 months ago. Inside were a few photos, most of them just debris and collapsed beams. But one stopped me cold. It showed the section of wall I'd broken open, the cavity behind it. Inside, barely visible under layers of dust and torn fabric, was what looked like a human face. The skin had sunk inward, the eyes hollow, the mouth stretched wide as if caught mid-scream. The sheriff tapped the photo. They tested the remains, he said. 3 different DNA profiles. None matched Maria. I looked up slowly. So where is she? He hesitated. We don't know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my new apartment, the folder open on the table, staring at the faces of the nameless dead. At some point I must have dozed off, because when I woke up, the room felt wrong. The air was heavy, thick with that same cold stillness I'd felt in the house. My phone screen glowed faintly on the nightstand, and I noticed something strange. The recorder app was open. It had been recording for 2 hours. I hadn't turned it on. My hands shook as I pressed play. For the first minute, nothing. Just silence. Then, faintly, breathing. Slow, shallow, close to the microphone. Then a whisper, barely audible but familiar enough to make my blood run cold. You left me. The voice wasn't Maria's. It was mine. I dropped the phone, heart hammering, staring at it as the recording continued by itself. The voice laughed softly. You opened the wall, Ellen. Now you're part of it. The recording cut off. I sat there, paralyzed, every instinct screaming that this couldn't be real. But when I looked up, something caught my eye. A small crack had formed in the paint beside the bed. I hadn't noticed it before. I reached out, fingertips brushing the surface. The plaster felt soft, almost pulsing beneath my touch. From somewhere deep inside, faint as a breath, came a sound. A whisper. Please. I moved out 2 days later. Left everything behind, furniture, clothes, even the phone. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I rented a small cabin near the coast, somewhere quiet, surrounded by fog and salt and distance. I thought maybe the ocean would drown the whispers. For a while, it did. But silence has a way of finding you. It's been 6 months now, and some nights, when the wind dies down and the sea is still, I swear I can hear it again. Not just one voice this time, but many. Dozens, layered together, whispering through the walls like breath through bone. I try to ignore them. I tell myself it's the tide, the wind, anything but what I know it is. Because deep down, I've started to understand something I wish I never had. The voice in that house wasn't trapped inside the wall. It was speaking through it. Reaching out. And maybe, just maybe, when I broke it open, I didn't set her free, I let the others out. They never found Maria. The house still stands, boarded up and condemned, though locals say you can still hear things if you get close enough at night. Whispers, faint and sad, calling for someone named Ellen. I don't know if that's true. I haven't been back, and I never will. But sometimes, when the lights flicker and the air turns cold, I still feel that same weight pressing behind the walls. Like something patient, waiting. Listening. And every now and then, when I close my eyes, I think I can hear it again, soft and familiar, just beneath the surface of the world. The whisper of a woman who never stopped calling my name.